Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education this Monday, May 6th. First, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Next, we will review and approve the agenda for May 6th. Can I get a motion? Penny, second. Campbell, all in favor? That's unanimous. Next, we'll approve the minutes for April 29th. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Laura, second. Brendan, all in favor? That's also unanimous. And next, comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker with a maximum of 15 minutes on each subject. Anybody like to know? Are you sure? All right. All right, moving on to reports and recognition from the illustrious Jill Carenti.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening to speak about the teacher evaluation and professional learning that we have here in our district, which is referred to as TEPL. TEPL is a growth mindset. It's the educator evaluation and professional growth systems that are intended to support the growth of the individual educator, and as well as the collective growth of a school and a district. The growth and evaluation process begins at the beginning of every year with a growth meeting that a teacher and an administrator have together, where they establish a professional growth plan for the upcoming year. And then between the beginning of the year and our mid-year, which is around January, the administrator completes observations of the teacher within the classroom. These can be either minis or formals. In the mid-year, the evaluator meets with the teacher and reviews their progress, not only towards their professional growth plan, but also toward their student data, as well as their observations in the classroom. They continue to complete their observation cycle, and they have a summative evaluation with their administrators at the end of the year. The process is meant to be cyclical because a teacher could be sitting at their summative evaluation and they could be talking about their goals for next year, or that they want to continue their professional growth plan, but they want to add some additional resources into that professional growth plan. So when you look at the feedback that our teachers get on a yearly basis, it begins with about 3 to 4 growth conferences per year. So the minimum is 3, beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of the year. And then they will either be on a cycle of having mini observations in which an administrator would be in their classroom for 4 to 6 times per year for about 15 to 20 minutes. Or they could have a comprehensive evaluation, which is where they're in the classroom for the full block of time, and those are 2 to 3 times per year. So in any given year, a teacher and an administrator are meeting anywhere between 3 to 9 touch points. And it's important to remember that our caseload for one administrator, it's about 25 certified staff. And in many cases, it's more than the 25 certified. So that's our building administrators, our principals, our assistant principals, our VPA director, our world language coordinator, our digital learning. So all of those people, special education administrators, are supervisors to our staff. And so you can imagine that a good majority of the focus of an administrator is really to supervise and evaluate staff, which is probably one of the most important things that we do as administrators, because it's what holds our teachers accountable in the classroom. So our effective teaching framework is what really guides where a person would pick their area of focus for their professional growth plan and or for the observations when administrators are going into their classrooms. There are 6 domains The domain 1 is our learning environment, domain 2 is our planning, domain 3 is responsive teaching, domain 4 is assessment literacy, domain 5 is professional learning and collaboration, and domain 6 is professional knowledge and responsibility. Under each of those domains are indicators. There are 32 indicators within these 6 domains that our teachers are evaluated on. About a year ago, a group of us came together to create domain number 7. Domain number 7 is really to help our teacher leaders grow. So this is where you will see many of our coaches. A coach could be a department chair, could be a curriculum coordinator, could be the dean of students, a reading or literacy specialist. It could be the math specialist, the classroom coach, technology integrators. Those are people that are in the coaching domain. In order to help them to grow, we created a domain, an area of indicators for them. So this was a new feature that we created last year. We were getting a lot of our teacher leaders asking for ways that they could grow. And to create that common language and to create that conversation that happens with those people, we created this domain and we put it into place this fall. And there are 4 indicators within this domain: the knowledge of skills, data analysis and application, knowledge of adult learners, communication with stakeholders. So I do have to say that our teacher leaders were very pleased to have this domain be added into the fall. And we've done a lot of professional learning, both for teacher leaders and for administrators, in how to evaluate staff in this area. I'm not going to go through each of the domains, but I did put them in your packet so that you have them for your reference. But this is how we would look at our effective teaching framework. We start with what it is at a glance, and then we dive more deeply into each of the domains. So the domains have what they would have the definition of the domain. So in this case, it's defining what learning environment is, and then it defines each of the indicators within that learning environment. So it's looking at that respectful environment, the student engagement, the development of social skills, the behavior management, the routines and transitions, and the instructional environment. And each of the domains is set up very similar. And so you can see that domain 2 is similar to how domain 3 is set up. Domain 3 is probably the one in which our teachers live in the most. This is our responsive teaching in the differentiated classroom. It's really at the heart of what teachers will do. And so many of our teachers are always picking professional growth plans in this area and picking one of those indicators to help themselves and grow, whether it's in student engagement or whether it's in differentiation of instruction or their questioning strategies that they use with the teachers. Here's a snapshot of domain number 4. A snapshot of domain number 5. Once again, these are just there for you to have for a reference in the future. I don't feel that I want to read through each of those. And domain number 6. And for many years, our teacher leaders were living in domain 5 and 6. But we weren't really helping them to grow. And that's really why we created the domain 7, which has also been clearly defined. But then as we move into the actual evaluation of our teachers, we have a rubric. And so you'll see here that this is what we call our indicator rubric. So this rubric actually sits in domain number 3. It's the responsive teaching in the differentiated classroom. And this happens to be the indicator number 7, differentiative instruction. So you will see that this is how we define differentiated instruction within our effective teaching framework. And then this is a way for teachers to do self-reflection as well as for administrators. So we have 4 categories, whether it's below standard, developing, accomplished, or exemplary. And this is a way for teachers to have conversations with administrators. It's a common language that we use. So if an administrator goes into a classroom and wants to have a reflective conversation with a teacher afterwards on a post-conference, they would often go back to these indicators to talk about where they are, what might be areas of strength, what might be areas of growth. And they'll do that based on some of the indicators that they saw within the classroom. Obviously, as an administrator, you're not going to go in and respond to all 32 or 36 indicators. That's just not possible. So it might be that you're picking up in the middle of a lesson, you're walking in, and so maybe you're thinking about the feedback that an administrator is giving to a teacher, or you're listening to the question that they're using with their children, and you might be wanting to have conversations about how do we increase that questioning to make the lesson more rigorous. So it's conversations, and this rubric helps us to guide those conversations with the teachers. We also are very unique in our district because we have created frameworks for other staff members. So when you look at the teaching framework, that's really for those classroom teachers. And then we added Domain 7 for those leaders, like a department chair who's not only teaching, but also leading a department so that we can help them to grow. But then we have frameworks for other staff. So for an example, this is the framework that we would use for school counselors, slightly different than a teaching framework. We have a framework that we have for psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech and language therapists. So once again, it's a way for an administrator to have a conversation with a school psychologist or a school counselor in their area, in their domain, in their content area. And we often get calls from districts about these frameworks that we've created for other staffs because it's really important because lots of districts don't have these kinds of frameworks. I talked a little bit about the professional growth plan that teachers develop at the beginning of the year. And really where the teachers begin is their reflection. So they'll take a look at that effective teaching framework and they'll start to ask themselves questions about what might be an area that they're growing in. Remember, the process is cyclical, so it might be something that a principal or an assistant principal have had a conversation with a teacher at their summative evaluation to say, you know, next year I think you might want to work in this area. And then that will help the teacher to target an area for professional growth for the upcoming school year. But it's really a growth mindset. It's not meant to be a gotcha. It's very meant to be a place for teachers to learn and grow. So maybe they want to study metacognition a little bit more, or how to get their students more highly engaged, or feedback, or questioning, or maybe they're really diving into new curriculum and they really need to spend time on the planning of that new curriculum that they're going to implement. So the effective teaching framework really guides the professional growth plan. And this is just a copy of the template that we use with the teachers. So they begin with their self-reflection, and then they begin with their professional growth plan. And we do create what we call SMART growth. We create SMART goals. So the SMART goals are measurable. So the teachers must write a SMART goal on how they're going to grow as a professional, what's their learning focus, and as a result of their learning focus, how will it impact students? And that's really important. So it's not that I just go out and I learn as much as I can about feedback. It's how will that impact my classroom and the student results within my classroom? And what will I make a shift in my practice in order to help improve the student results in my classroom? The teachers are asked to kind of create a plan for the year. They talk about the process that they might follow, whether they're going to participate in professional development, whether they're going to be reading a book, whether they're going to be attending a webinar. There's lots of different ways that the teachers will grow in these areas. And then it's also a collaborative process. You know, people don't like to learn in isolation. They like to work with other people, whether they be in their departments or whether they be on their grade level. And so oftentimes they may even be collaborating on a particular area together, and we might all be studying differentiation of instruction, and what I might be doing in my classroom might be slightly different than the colleague across the hallway, but we come together to study together. We come together together to listen to a webinar. We come together to read a book and have a conversation. And sometimes I will reach out to experts. I might consult with my math specialist or my reading specialist or somebody that's international or national or at a university level. It's amazing the connections that our staff make with people in order to help grow professionally. And then they're always talking about that evidence. What will they be doing to collect that evidence so that when they sit down with their administrator, they can talk about their plan, how they've grown as a professional, and ultimately how it's impacted the students within their classrooms. Every building has a learning community growth goal, as well as a whole school student learning growth goal. The learning community growth goal is usually based on the feedback that the building will receive on the school climate surveys. And so that's part of the stakeholder feedback that we are responsible for having. And so the building administrators, usually in conjunction with a group of people, their school climate committees, will help to develop those goals based on the data analysis that they do. And then they also have a whole school student learning goal, which might be about rigor, might be about questioning. It might be something that an administrator is noticing that all people can help to grow in. When it comes to our mid-year and our end of the year, we ask our teachers to reflect on these 4 areas. They talk about the educator observation of practice, so it's really them reflecting on those domains and where they are within those domains in their classroom practice. They always are talking about student growth, whether it's with their professional growth plan or the data that they have on their students throughout the course of the year and how their students are making growth over time. The whole school student learning is more about what are they contributing as a staff member to help the school grow in this area, and the same holds true for that learning community growth goal. So they might not have particular data from their classroom, but perhaps they're working on a committee to make parents more inclusive in their school, if that's what their learning community growth goal is. And then at the end of the year, they do have a conversation at their mid-year. They talk about where they are and the progress that they're making. And it's the end of the year where they receive a summative evaluation. And so the administrator will score them on the rubric, and they will give them descriptive feedback in each of those 4 categories and how the teachers are doing. So they have a lengthy conversation. The teacher does a written summative. They submit it to their administrator. They bring data. They bring other artifacts. It's a really a deep conversation that they have with all of their teachers. And then the administrator responds back to the teachers. We have an electronic platform that we use. It's called Talent Ed. So all of our forms are right within there, and it's a communication that goes back and forth electronically, which is terrific when you're thinking of all the files that we have at central office, even from HR department. So we don't need to make copies of those and send those down to be put into a personnel file. They're all on a computer, and at any time we could go in and just run a history and run reports on the staff. And then this is just an example of what the summative evaluation rubric would look like. So they would be talking about whether they're below standard, developing, accomplished, or exemplary in each of those categories. And then we do what we call an algorithm to come up with one area. So it's an algorithm, so 2 of the ratings are really where it's the observation of practice and the learning community growth, and the other is the whole school student learning and their observation of practice. And so it brings it together, and the teachers will receive 1 rating at the end of the year. So they might be considered developing, or they might be considered accomplished. So they might be in that area for growth. So the teacher evaluation plan has been in existence for probably since 2011. It was back in 2011 when the State Department of Ed created what they called the SEED model. And so they came out with an evaluation plan that they were asking all districts to implement. When we looked at the model that the state had created, we decided that that wasn't the model that we wanted to follow. So we did a waiver to the state of Connecticut. There were 7 districts in the state of Connecticut that submitted a waiver and were approved for the waiver. We felt really strongly about the effective teaching framework that we had created. We felt very strongly about the plan that we had created. When we create these plans, it's a large committee that sits around a table. It is administrators, it is teachers, and it is ongoing conversation, and you create guiding principles. And one of the things that we heard back in 2011 from teachers was that we really want feedback. Like, who doesn't want feedback on how they're doing in their job? Everybody likes feedback. And so our teachers really felt that they wanted to hear from their administrators, which is where we ended with this rigorous plan, where you have your administrator touching base with you 3 to 9 times a year. And so when you start to do the math, you can imagine that's pretty extensive. Our administrators are also evaluated. Their plan is called LEPL. It's the Leader Evaluation Professional Learning Plan. So certainly Bill Tesber, myself, Brian serve as evaluators for many of the administrators within the district. It's just as extensive. We felt really strongly when we submitted our waiver to the state that the teachers had a rigorous plan, and so should the administrators. And the 2 plans really mirror one another. We've seen a lot of impact. We've seen, the analysis of data and how they use that data for instruction. We see that they have really increased their pedagogy within their classroom. It's very rigorous. They understand what feedback is. They understand that it's not a gotcha model. It's really meant to help you to grow. You can't be exemplary in every single indicator all the time. There's always places for us to grow as both administrators and as staff within our classrooms. And then it really encouraged collaboration. Many of the teachers have studied together, created what you call here probably PLCs, professional learning communities, where they're really spending time diving deeply into topics. And they will oftentimes carry a goal, maybe for 2 years, just making slight tweaks to it. So now we fast forward to 2023, where the state of Connecticut has decided that it's time to look at new Connecticut guidelines for teacher evaluation as well as leader evaluations for both TEPL and LEPL. So we've come together. It took a while for the State Department of Ed to send out what the guidelines would be and to send out a plan, a drafted plan. We have been meeting with a group of leaders and teachers for several months. Darlene is part of that committee, as well as our union president, our union vice president. We have administrators from all levels, and then we have teachers. There's probably not a group that's not represented. So there's a music teacher, there's a science teacher, there's a math teacher, there's a kindergarten teacher. Every group is represented. We usually meet here in the Wagner Room. We've spent a lot of time looking at what the state is calling non-negotiables, which is very similar to what we've done before with our waiver. The state will say there are certain non-negotiables that every plan must have. And it was really interesting because I think our teachers were very proud when they started to look at the non-negotiables that the state had put out, when they looked at the plan that the state had put out, and then they really dove deeply into our plan. And so we are actually in a really great place because there aren't too many adjustments that we will have to make to our plan. It's nice to come together as a group. It's nice to have conversations. It's nice to be able to talk about the calibration across a district. It's every so often you'll hear something and you'll be like, we probably need to go back and do professional learning. I'm not sure why that might be interpreted one way in one building and not necessarily in another. So sometimes we've got to come back together and do some professional learning as a whole group. But really, we already have a goal-setting process, where everybody has to meet 3 times a year. That's a non-negotiable that they've put into place. There has to be, stakeholder feedback. We already have that in place with our learning community growth goal, our school climate surveys that we use. We have to have, a rubric that we're going to take a look at. What's the framework that we're going to utilize? There are frameworks out there, or you could use one of your own frameworks as long as they're based on research. Our framework is based on research. And then there's always dispute resolution. So there's some minor tweaks that we'll have to make to the plan based on, some laws always change with dispute resolution, that a teacher's not happy with the rating that they received and the administrator feels strongly about that, and there's a dispute on that, and there's a resolution that we have to follow. There's some changes that have to happen with structured assistance plans. They want it more like a tiered, so that it shows that as an administrator, before you move a teacher to a structured assistance plan, that you've given it good effort. You've tried this, you've tried this, you've tried this, and now it's time to move to a structured assistance plan for teachers. So we're in a good place. We will need to submit this probably by, I'm guessing, August 1st, and we'll make those tweaks, make those adjustments. It's a great time because I think also we've had an opportunity to come back. We're looking at the forms that we use, so that's really been a nice voice for the teachers to say we've lived with these forms for 10 years. Are there things that we can change? Are there things that we can adjust? Are there things that we could make more user-friendly? The big conversation that we're always having is the amount of writing. So our teachers strive to be the best. Our teachers work really hard, and oftentimes they write dissertations because they want to show all that they've done throughout the course of the year. And so we're really trying to move more to what's the discussion that you can have and how can we capture the discussion versus submitting a 30-page document. Nobody needs to be submitting a 30-page document. Teachers don't need to be doing all of that writing, and administrators don't need to be doing all that reading. So it's really having good conversations and really having an opportunity to give them that feedback orally and then really kind of summarize that conversation in writing. So I'm happy to open it up to questions. I think I did a pretty good job with my time.
That was great. Thank you. Questions? Brendan?
Thank you for the presentation. I guess it's sort of a broad question of where do we feel like we've been able to help teachers the most using this program in the last 3, 5, 10 years that we've been doing it? And have we seen any sort of trends in terms of ways we've been able to help teachers grow and how they teach?
So I think the one area for growth that has really helped over the last 10 years is really the data analysis. It's really taking that time to sit and look at the data that's sitting in front of them about the students and then analyzing that data. So it's not only just collecting it, but it's doing that deep analysis. It's going in and really saying, okay, so they understand this, but they still don't understand this, and how am I going to spiral backwards to make sure that they still fully understand it, which is all about that differentiation within their classrooms and how do they create large group instruction, how do they create small group instruction, how do they give meaningful independent tasks that is allowing the teacher to see that they understand what they've taught, but that it's not too tedious as well, that it's that fine balance that needs to take place within the classroom. So I think that's an area that they're always looking to improve in as far as that differentiation, because once again, sometimes you recognize that you have a group of students within your classroom that may not be understanding a certain unit of study in mathematics. And so then you're trying to say to yourself, how do I scaffold backwards to try to figure out, is there a standard that maybe they missed the year before that I need to go back and reteach and make sure that they have a deeper understanding of that standard so that they can now understand the content that I'm about to teach in this unit of study. And so that's been a lot of work that we've been doing, and they really rely on that curriculum to then be able to go back and look at the standards that might have been taught a course before what they have, or a year. So if you're a high school teacher and you're teaching math, you're always going back to say, what was that possible algebra concept that they may have missed that's giving them some trouble in Algebra 2? And how do I circle back to make sure that they have an understanding of that? And then the same would hold true even in grade 3. What is it that they might be missing that I need to go back and teach and scaffold for? And that's where it's really helpful when you have math specialists and coaches that can really help to dive more deeply into that and help to interpret some of those standards for the teachers.
Pat? Oh, sorry.
Which one? Campbell. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the presentation. And, you know, in the 10 years I've been here, teachers, you know, for the most part, or we've had phenomenal teachers. My experiences with teachers has been mostly positive, but I have run across parents that have expressed frustration, and, you know, I think the temperament of some teachers, especially as it relates to some of the younger grades, where that temperament has an impact, psychological impact on the children, the emotional well-being, and how they perceive the classroom or even the school experience, right? And so, and recognizing that there's three sides to every story, there's been consistent, sometimes I hear consistent feedback about the same individual, right, or individuals. How is that addressed in Temple? Because it seems to me that there's no real sort of place to capture that, because any rational person would modify their behavior under observation, right? And so how do we capture that and address the concerns of parents that maybe teachers are, I don't say bullying, but maybe they're just too abrasive or too with their first and second graders, right? I mean, how do we capture that and sort of identify those teachers and correct that behavior or take corrective action?
So I can speak of my experience as a building administrator. So I've been on those phone calls with parents before where they might feel that a teacher is a little bit abrupt, or they might be talking too loudly with kids. And so it's, once again, it's always trying to figure out what's the perception of a student versus what's actually happening in the classroom. I do think it's that frequent visit with the teacher. It's having conversations with students. I mean, one of the first things as a principal when you walk into a room is you start talking to kids. It's less about standing there and observing the teacher. It's talking with the students about, what are you learning today? Is this typical of what happens within your classroom? There's lots of questions, and you can usually gather what is happening within that classroom. I would also say, and this is a great time to say this, especially to all the elementary parents, when the principal asks for input, it's so important to talk about your child and what you think might be a good learning environment, how your child learns best. So I used to always say to parents, do not put a teacher's name down, because every child learns differently. And I have to say that the beauty of having 5 to 6 sections of an elementary classroom, of an elementary grade level, is that every teacher is slightly different. And what might be the match for one child might not be the same match for another child. And so as a principal of an elementary school, you know those elementary kids so well. You get to know them, you learn about them. The only grade level you don't know so great is kindergarten, because they're all coming in and you don't know them so well. But by the time they're hitting, second grade, you know kids well, and you start to understand what's a great match for kids and what's a great classroom makeup of kids. And so it's always so important to have that communication with those administrators, have that conversation with those administrators, try to give specific details when you're calling an administrator, because it gives them an opportunity to go do their own observations, go take their own look. But that whole learning environment, that whole domain is something that teachers are evaluated every year on. So I don't know if that answered your question, but we do have plans that we put in place. The administrators would never talk to a parent about a plan, nor would they ever talk to another teacher about a plan that they would put in place for a teacher. That's between the teacher and an administrator.
Okay.
Wexler.
My question actually builds on that as well. If an evaluation of a teacher, according to these guidelines, comes back positive, but yet there is feedback to the contrary coming from parents, to what degree does that feed into the overall evaluation of a teacher?
So I think that, ultimately an administrator is always working off of the effective teaching framework because that's what the observable behavior is within that classroom. That is what they're observing on a day-to-day basis. That's what they're having the dialogue with. That's not to say that as a principal, sometimes you sit and you have difficult conversations. And sometimes you just need to let teachers know that I want you to understand that I am receiving this feedback from parents. And you should be aware of the feedback that I'm receiving. And even though I may be in your classroom and I'm not observing that, unfortunately, this is the feedback that might be happening. So how can we help to improve that so that's not the feedback that you receive from parents? And so it's having that conversation with them. Maybe you need to communicate more with your parent body and let them know what's happening in your classroom. Maybe you need to send out more newsletters. Maybe you need to send out more emails about what's going on within your classroom. Maybe you need to invite parents in for an author's visit. So there are ways that you can always improve the communication that occurs with parents and with teachers. And then certainly, I think it also just makes a teacher aware, like nobody wants to have a bad reputation. Everybody wants to have positive reputations. Everybody wants to grow. And sometimes you just sit and have those conversations with them, and you help them to grow in that regard.
So you said back in 2011 that the sentiment was that we want feedback, right? Do teachers still feel that way? And if, how do we know?
Teachers love feedback. They want people to go in and out of their classrooms. Anytime we do a focus group with a group of teachers, they will say, we want people in and out of our classrooms. We want to know that we're doing a good job. We want to know that we have areas of growth. It's a very common conversation that we have at the TEPL committee meeting. So we do hear that regularly. We especially hear that from new teachers. They want people in and out of their classrooms as much as possible. And if it's not always the administrator, it's a coach, it's a specialist. It's ways for them to grow.
So I understand that part, but if it's let's say I'm not a 25-year-old, I'm a 60-year-old, and I've been in the district for 30, 35 years. I have a great reputation, beloved by families. Would I feel the same way? In other words, do we make distinctions between the teachers who really need it and the ones who have been here forever and who might see it as kind of a little more tedious?
So there's 2 observation cycles. So somebody that's brand new would have what we call comprehensive evaluations. And so that means I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit in their classroom for a full hour. I'm going to be there for their full reading block of time. When it comes to those veteran teachers, oftentimes it's the conversation about what's your professional growth plan in, and is there a time that I can come into your classroom to observe that for 15 minutes to give you some feedback in that particular area. And so then the teacher would say, it would be great if you come in tomorrow during my mini lesson. You're going to hear my questioning. Can you script my questions? Because I would really want to hear what kinds of questions am I using with my students to help me to grow. And so we will make it very targeted for them so that they're feeling like they're getting the feedback that they would like in a particular area.
Thanks.
Do you just off the top of your head, do you have a rough breakdown of, ideally across the district, of those that rank exemplary mostly, those that rank accomplished mostly, sort of rough breakdown percentage-wise?
So I do not have the data off the top of my head, but I will tell you that up until COVID, and then it shifted slightly with COVID, and then we returned to it. At the end of every year, as part of our state reporting, we actually had to report out how many teachers performed at exemplary, how many were at accomplished, how many were at each of the level. And so, and all the buildings, and even for administrators, you had to share that. No teachers' names were attached. It was just numbers. And now I think the state will be shifting more toward not about where they perform, but that they're getting evaluations, so that you're actually completing the evaluations that need to be completed on a teacher. And so that's the new shift with the new plan. It's less about how many teachers are at exemplary, how many are at accomplished. It's more about, did they receive all the observations that they were supposed to receive and the feedback that they were supposed to receive. And then usually it comes down to a 1-point rubric. Are they effective or not effective?
So that's the new state standard. Will our district continue to identify them in the below standard development or accomplished? Like, will we keep notes about that and percentages of teachers who hit this accomplished goal versus the below standard?
So that's a conversation we're having with the committee right now, and what I'm hearing from the committee and is that they like the algorithm that we use. So they like having the rating. It gives them a perspective of where they are and ways that they can improve.
But will the district still be tracking the percentage in each bucket?
So we can track that through our talent ed. So it's really easy for us to go in, you run a report. So it's easy for us to go in from an HR perspective or from my perspective to run a report to see how many observations, how many evaluations were completed. It's easy for me to run a report of how many teachers are exemplary, accomplished, below standard. What's most important is the dialogue that happens with the administrators and why they might be seeing that. And Brian and the rest of the cabinet meets every year in January with all of the buildings to talk about all the non-tenured teachers. And so we do have a conversation. What track are they on, or how are they performing? What are ways that we can support to help them to grow? And we're always informed if there's a teacher that is on a structured assistance plan. And oftentimes we're working with an administrator to help develop that plan for teachers.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add, one of the challenges of the onboarding is TEPL itself is a very high standard. You don't have all of them here, but they are available online. If you go in, you can see the continuum of practice around each of these individual indicators and underneath each domain. So for our new teachers, we would expect brand new teachers to be developing in some of those areas, and it's also it's designed so that people aren't living in exemplary, so to speak, where that's just, year after year. So there is some movement back and forth, but it is part of helping people understand that this is a high standard, and the committee meets regularly. Jill mentioned the committee's been meeting this year. It meets a couple of times every year to continue those standards, to look at it, to review it, and be sure that it is holding people to a high standard, and it does. Having looked at many different models, and there's lots of professional models, other things out there, I think our model is far and away the best because of the way that it articulates the observations of practice under each of the indicators that have been articulated within the domains. So the way that it works, it's literally, this is what it looks like when someone is exemplary. This is what it looks like when somebody is accomplished. Here's what it is below, or developing, and here's below. And so it's, there's movement, but we expect that brand new teachers coming in will have some room to grow, because it's a growth-oriented model, as Jill started.
And how long, or is there a process by which, a duration by which, if a teacher is not progressing up, as in they're stuck in the below standard or developing even, that we would take more serious action?
Yep, that's, Jill mentioned the meetings that we have annually. We spend quite a few hours in each building, depending upon the number of non-tenured staff that are there and others. We have those conversations about each individual. It's case by case, independent. Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that a veteran teacher couldn't go on a structured assistance plan too. So it takes 4 years in the state of Connecticut to receive your tenure, and then we talk about non-tenured tenure. And so a tenured staff member could also go on a structured assistance plan if the observations are warranting it.
For new teachers, I'm wondering if you are seeing any differences on what new teachers need in their first couple of years compared to, going back 5 or 10 years, because we know that there are changes in the pool that we're seeing for teachers. And so I'm wondering if that's reflected in the first or second or third year feedback we get.
I think that first of all, new teachers are on what they call team, so they don't do our professional growth plan. They're doing the team which is for the state certification. So they have to do so many modules, and they get scored by the State Department of Ed on those modules that they complete. So that serves as their professional growth plan. But it is all in those same domains that we have as far as, differentiation or classroom community or planning. So that is part of, and they're assigned a veteran mentor to support them. So the first thing that we do with our new teachers is we try to give as much support to them as possible. So they're assigned a mentor who's an experienced teacher who's gone through training within the district. That's number one. If we can't find somebody in their department or on their grade level, we find somebody very close to their grade level or right next door in their department so that they can meet with them at least every other week. Oftentimes, they're meeting with them weekly. And then we have another layer of our instructional leaders and our department chairs who are really helping those new teachers with planning. And there's another layer of our math specialist or reading or writing specialist or our curriculum coordinators who are also working with those new teachers. I think the new teachers, like all new teachers, they range. You'll have some that come in that have that classroom management and they're ready to move into a whole nother domain. And then there's others that need a little bit more time where our classroom coach has worked very closely with them to help establish those expectations, help them to make better transitions within their classrooms, really help them to move along with their practice.
Great. And for the Domain 7, which was new this year, are you getting any feedback is that framework what you think we'll need going forward? Are you getting feedback on any changes, not to adding or subtracting on a large level, but word choices or things that will make it more effective? Or what are you generally getting in the way of feedback on the new domain?
We'll have more feedback as they're wrapping into their summative evaluations. So, throughout the course of the year, we had good positive feedback on their mid-years. We had great feedback at the beginning of the year when they were all establishing their professional growth plans because they really could dive into an area that they wanted to work on. And then we had some feedback at the mid-year, but then we'll do probably a focus group at the end of the year with the summative to see if any tweaks need to be made to the framework.
Great. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of the coach when there is like the formalized like classroom coach, math coach, et cetera, and how they work with the supervisor. So like this mostly describes the supervisor interactions, but the coach comes in between those evaluations. And I'm wondering if you could just talk about the back and forth between those two who are helping the teacher.
So there's ongoing conversations that occur between the coaches and the administrators all the time. So if I was to look at the classroom coach's schedule, for example, she spends a day in every single building, and then she spends half days. So on Mondays is kind of her day to touch base with administrators or to touch base with other specialists in one of the buildings in the morning, another building in the afternoon. Actually, on Monday, she hits all three buildings. That's how it's been designed. And it's really kind of letting the administrator know, these are the things I've been working with this teacher on, and these are the things that I'm seeing such great growth in. And the administrator might say, I'm seeing the same growth, or, can we work with this new teacher to help them to grow their classroom management? So it's that ongoing conversation. And then really it's the coaching cycle that she'll create with those teachers in the classrooms, meeting with them during prep times, meeting with them before school, after school. And then on Fridays is usually a day where she'll meet with Dr. Bliss and myself, and we'll try to say, is there any big things that we're seeing across the district that we can help to provide professional learning to help people to grow.
Great. Thank you.
Can I make one last comment?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just a gentle reminder that we would love to have the classroom coach here when the time is right.
Thanks, Dr. Carenti. All right, we've got a few action items.
Committee reports.
Oh, sorry, committee reports. Apologies. Yep, missed that. So we'll start with, I guess, Penny.
So we've been working on two policies, which we brought forward to the board today for the first read: school resource officer and increasing educational diversity plan. So we'll get your comments on those later on in the agenda. And once we've gone through the 2 reads and gotten those policies in place, we'll then meet and set our new priorities. We did take a little bit of a break during the winter when we were going through the intense budget process. But we're happy to be bringing these forward to you tonight.
Thanks, Penny. And then from Communications, Erica?
Great. So the Communications Committee is focused on strengthening the community's awareness of the public schools activities and major updates. We work with Michelle Snyder, who is the webmaster and social media specialist for the district. And through the last several months, we have focused on really 3 main things. The first one was partnering with CARES on the Max Stossel presentation. We've gotten great anecdotal feedback on that, and a big thank you to CARES for partnering and bringing Max Stossel to the district. The second one was supporting the Dome, the ribbon cutting and the grand opening, and having that opportunity to connect with town officials and bring them in to see some of the work in the district, which is good, important from a communication standpoint. And the third is Michelle continues to make enhancements to our technology. So she's recently been making updates to the Facebook page. We have updated the food services page around sustainable content. And we continue to look at the website, the app, the Facebook page, et cetera, to figure out how we can continue to improve our overall communication with the larger community. So that's what we've been working on.
Great, thank you. And then resources, Laura?
Great. I think that one of the things the resources is most excited about is also the Dome. That was a very innovative process of bringing in the town and community for private funding for a public school thing. As I understand, it's the first time we've ever done that sort of partnership, and excited about what that means for our students and that kind of innovation and what that could bring in the future. Sean has helped us prioritize the completion of open capital projects that we already had, especially some that were lingering from COVID, the van that never came, that finally came, the boilers at the elementary schools, and some of the ongoing improvement to our buildings that we've been working on. As a new member of the Resource Committee, have been very impressed of how they've dealt with the long budget process and trying to create the most efficient budget as different town bodies wanted to see cuts or changes or stuff, and really balancing the demands of the community. And going forward, we're exploring options with the very successful lunch program that we have, and I'm sure looking at the budget again for next year sooner than later.
Thanks, Laura. And then facilities, Phil.
So the high school entrance sign is in the process, well, it's been in the process of being replaced. It's not dug up. The foundation is being laid, and it's going to be ready by graduation, so good timing on that. This past week, the committee saw a demo from the New Canaan Booster Club for an LED sign that would replace the fence at the southwest corner of Farm and South. I don't think the committee is ready to make any kind of recommendation, but we're certainly appreciative of the Booster Club and the ladies involved there, and we'll kind of come back with once we get some more information there. On the thornier stuff, it's obviously no secret that our projections indicate we may be running into capacity issues at the elementary schools in the not-too-distant future. Couple that with facilities that are getting older, and it's not optimal. I think our elementary schools are something like 30, 35 years old, around there. We got a presentation from SLAM a couple months ago, who obviously does the projections for us, but could also be part of potential kind of right-sizing solutions for the elementary schools. So we're going to keep those conversations going. This past week we toured Oxridge Elementary, which just got a major facelift as part of a broader plan for Darien's elementary schools. So thank you to their superintendent and interim principal. Westport's also going down the same path with refurbishing their elementaries, so this is kind of happening on our DIRG, and I think it's probably time for us to come up with some kind of long-term plan for our elementaries, and I think in conjunction with that, potentially find a more suitable place for our pre-K program, which is currently housed at West and is, I think, expanding right now. So a lot of balls in the air. Some of these are really good problems to have. I say that a lot, but it means we're doing a lot right, but interesting times ahead with facilities, that's for sure.
Thanks, Phil. Any questions for any of the committee members? No, I want to thank all of you guys for the time. I think a lot of people don't realize just how much work goes into the work on the board, and a lot of that gets done in these committees. So I do appreciate all of the time that you guys put into these things, and thanks for the update. And anything you wanted to add? No, we're moving on. Yeah. Okay. So next, action items. These are always fun. Moving to approve a donation of $62,752.40 from the New Canaan All Sports Booster Club to support the 2024 spring coaching positions.
I can just very quickly let the board know, the New Canaan All Sports Booster Club is making the donation in support of the goals of the organization, which are to provide facility and resource enhancements for athletics, to recognize and celebrate athletic-related achievements by all of our coaches and athletes, and to fund professional development for all coaches and support personnel. So the Booster Club believes that lowering the coach-to-athlete ratio leads to more effective instruction and increases the opportunities for positive athletic experiences. We believe that too. They are therefore making this very generous donation, $62,752.40. And I want to say a special thank you to the co-presidents, Carrie Pinkernell and Patty Zoccolillo, who continue to do amazing work on behalf of our children and programs. And really to say thanks to the whole group and the whole community who helps keep our program as vibrant and successful as it is.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. I think it's absolutely incredible. We're all extremely fortunate to live in such a caring community that is willing to do all this. It's amazing we get to accept so many of these gifts and really appreciate that. So I'll move to approve the donation. Laura, first motion, second. Penny, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then moving on to the policy updates that Penny had alluded to, mentioned earlier, that we've been working on.
Yep, the first one is a revision to our existing school resource officer policy. As you know, we are looking at beginning the new year with additional SROs at one at each of the elementary schools. So we wanted to amend this both in the first paragraph, the very last sentence, last couple of words, where it says in New Canaan High School, Sax Middle School, and in each of the elementary schools. And then we looked and revised the duties of the SRO based upon our conversation that we had together with the governance committee, and sort of updated that a bit so that it was aligned with our expectations and our experiences. This original policy dates back to 2010, so we wanted to take it and to modernize it and put in here what we've been learning. The other addition into the policy is the very last paragraph, where it talks about the MOU that the district will enter into with the New Canaan Police Department. And that all of that language there is in accordance with the most recent statute that looks to specifically define the responsibilities and the role of the SROs in our schools. This is not the MOU itself. The MOU will be attached and included with this as a regulation to the policy. This creates that space for it, gives those general guidelines, and then I'm working on the MOU with the chief and deputy chief at the NCPD. And once that's ready for the board, we'll bring that forward and attach it here as a regulation, both of which will be available online with our policy manual. So the regulation, when a policy calls for regulation to be attached, it generally is included in the policy manual with that policy. And the same goes with for the next one that we'll discuss in a moment.
Any questions so far? So do I make a motion to accept the first reading?
Yes.
Brendan, second. Matt Campbell,
Well, we don't
and that's
vote.
it, right.
And then we go to the next, which is the new policy, 4111.3, Increasing Educator Diversity Plan. And similar to the SRO policy, this is not the plan itself. This is that high-level overview of what will be in the plan, which will be attached as a regulation to this. The state is, it's again in response to legislation, and the state is providing a template that all districts are required to use in putting that plan together. And we anticipate it'll be an iterative process with the state where we would put it together, send it there, we'd receive it with feedback and continue to go back and forth. And once that process is through, we'll bring it to the board for conversation. The plan itself is being developed by a committee that Darlene is heading, and we've got teacher representation from across the district that are in there, a couple of administrators, and they've been working through the questions in that template and putting it all together in order to satisfy the requirements of the state and the statute. As you can see, there's 6 items that again, flow from that statute. That will be included in the plan through that template that's provided, and then there'll be more information there too. And if there's anything to add, Darlene, feel free. But we anticipate probably a month, we'd be complete with that back and forth conversation with the state and be able to bring that forward.
And I want to thank you guys for working so hard, because I know that this stuff gets dumped on you from the state amongst your day job, and it requires a lot of time, a lot of focus, and we do things our way, but obviously have to follow the law of the land, and I do appreciate all the work you guys put into it, and then also in governance, where we can try and just fine-tune this to make sure that we are following the rules, but also not changing the ultimate product that we deliver to our community. So thank you. And moving to approve, the new Board of Education Policy 4111.3, increasing educator diversity plan for first reading.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Question first. So this first reading, or I guess this is not the plan, I'm wondering, is the language, I'm assuming it's going to be more detailed. I mean, I don't know what a diverse individual is or diverse organization.
Yeah, I think those will be spelled out in that template a little bit more clearly.
Okay.
But certainly glad to, if we have a specific question, that's, between now and the next
Yeah, that's,
reading,
okay, that's just
to-
making sure.
in that
Yep.
conversation.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, to be clear, so we read, we'll bring these home, some light reading, make some notes, questions, and then we, discuss again in the next meeting and make adjustments if we need to, and then vote on it. Right. So I guess motion to approve as a first reading. Penny, Campbell, second. Okay, moving on to comments from the public. No, still? Are you sure? Okay, all right, going well. Thank you. And then announcements and future business.
Yep, just very quickly, we had our grand opening of the Dome last week, and again, many of the board members were there. Great success there. Also to share that just today, I received pictures from Mr. Gusich as he was in the Dome with the 8th grade students, and lots of happy faces and awestruck expressions as they were experiencing that together. All of our 2nd graders now have come through, so now we're shifting over to the middle school and trying to really utilize this. It's a tight timeline with the next couple of weeks and all the activities, but getting our kids in there and giving them the opportunity to experience it themselves wherever we can. So very exciting that way. We have other showings that will be occurring in the next couple of weeks here and there, as well as ways to share with the community. And as was mentioned, between resources and governance, we'll be looking at our facility usage so that we can put that plan together for the fall. Hopefully is the target there. That's great.
Excellent. And then, so we need to finish our executive meeting from before, so I make a motion to adjourn this meeting into executive session. All right? Okay, good. We're on the same page here. Thank you. All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn into executive session in accordance with CGS 1200. Getting a motion, Julie. Second, Brendan. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.